Please subscribe, hit the like button, and let us know in the comments where you are watching from. My name is Claire. I moved into my husband's childhood home with his mother after our wedding, a temporary arrangement that stretched into 3 years. She had one rule, repeated so often it became a mantra: never open the locked drawer in the guest room. I obeyed, until the night, curiosity, instinct, and a misplaced key collided. The warning came on my first day in the house, delivered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Linda stood in the guest room doorway, arms crossed, watching me unpack boxes. The room was pleasant enough: pale yellow walls, antique furniture, lace curtains filtering afternoon light, but her attention was fixed on the mahogany dresser against the far wall, specifically the bottom drawer with its ornate brass lock. She told me that the drawer was private, family heirlooms, she said, sentimental items too precious to risk. The key was hidden, and I should never, under any circumstances, try to open it. Her tone was light, conversational, but underneath ran a current of steel. This wasn't a request, it was a command. I agreed, easy. Why wouldn't I? I had no interest in her personal belongings, no curiosity about old photographs or jewelry she wanted to protect. My husband Mark had shrugged when I mentioned it later, said his mother had always been particular about that drawer, that it was best to just respect her wishes. So I did. For 3 years, that locked drawer existed as background scenery in a room I rarely entered. We lived in what had been Mark's childhood bedroom, cramped but manageable while we saved for our own place. Linda occupied the master suite. The guest room remained empty except for holidays, when Mark's sister visited with her family. But boundaries, I learned, are often warnings about what lies beyond them. The house had its rhythms. Linda woke early, made elaborate breakfasts I never asked for, and reorganized my kitchen cabinets while I was at work. She asked intrusive questions about our finances, our plans for children, and my relationship with my own family. Mark saw it as motherly concern. I saw it as surveillance. She had a way of appearing in doorways when Mark and I were talking, her presence ending private conversations. She commented on my cooking, my cleaning, and my choice of friends, always sweetly, always with that same smile. But the house never felt like mine. It felt like I was a guest in someone else's museum, where everything had a place, and I wasn't sure I'd found mine yet. The drawer haunted me in small ways, not obsessively, but persistently. I'd pass the guest room and glance at the dresser, wondering what was so precious it required a lock. What memories or treasures were worth guarding for decades. Sometimes, late at night when the house settled into its old wood creaks and whispers, I'd think about that drawer and feel an inexplicable unease. Something about Linda's warning felt disproportionate, too intense for photo albums, too protective of inherited jewelry. But I pushed the thoughts away, told myself I was reading too much into an old woman's attachment to her past, until the key fell from a book I'd borrowed from Linda's shelf. It was a Tuesday evening in October. Linda had gone to her book club and wouldn't return for at least 2 hours. Mark was working late, another project deadline consuming his nights. I was alone in the house, curled on the sofa with a mystery novel I'd taken from Linda's extensive collection. The key slipped out from between pages 63 and 64, landing on my lap with a soft clink. Small, brass, old-fashioned, exactly the size and style that would fit the dresser drawer upstairs. My heart kicked against my ribs. I picked it up, felt its weight, and turned it over in my palm. This could be anything: a key to a music box, a jewelry case, a diary. But I knew, some instinct deeper than logic told me this was the key Linda had hidden, the one that opened the forbidden drawer. I sat there for 10 minutes, key in hand, wrestling with myself. Respect for boundaries versus burning curiosity, trust versus suspicion that had been building for 3 years under Linda's constant scrutiny. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step a decision renewed. At the guest room door, I paused, looked back down the hallway as if Linda might materialize, might somehow know what I was considering. The room smelled faintly of lavender and dust. I crossed to the dresser, knelt before the bottom drawer, and held the key to the lock. It slid in perfectly, turned with a soft click that sounded unnaturally loud in the silence. The drawer opened. Inside, no heirlooms, no jewelry, no photographs of deceased relatives or sentimental letters from Linda's youth. Instead, folders, dozens of manila folders, organized with tabs and dates. I pulled out the first one, hands trembling. Inside were documents, legal papers, medical records, but not Linda's. They were Mark's first wife's records. I stopped breathing. Mark had been married before. He'd told me about Sarah early in our relationship. A brief marriage in his 20s ended in divorce. He'd been vague about details, said it was painful, and he preferred not to dwell on the past. I respected that, never pushed. But here was Sarah's entire life, documented with disturbing thoroughness: medical appointments, prescription records, bank statements, copies of emails and text messages, photographs taken from distances, through windows, in parking lots, surveillance photos. My hands shook as I opened another folder. This one was labeled with my name. Pages and pages of information about me, background checks dating back to before Mark and I met, employment records, financial statements, social media posts printed and annotated in Linda's handwriting, photos of me at work, at the grocery store, having coffee with friends, all taken without my knowledge, collected systematically over the 4 years Mark and I had been together. But it was the third folder that made bile rise in my throat. This one contained letters, handwritten, never sent, addressed to various people, doctors, lawyers, Mark's employer, and my employer. Letters filled with lies, allegations that Sarah had been mentally unstable, dangerously erratic, and a threat to Mark's well-being. Similar letters about me claims I was manipulative, financially irresponsible, and potentially violent. Linda had been building cases against both of us, documenting our lives, creating narratives that painted us as threats that needed to be removed from Mark's life. At the bottom of the drawer, underneath all the folders, was a leather journal. Linda's handwriting filled every page. I flipped through it with numb fingers, reading entries that detailed her plans, how she'd convinced Mark that Sarah was cheating, planted evidence, and encouraged their divorce, how she'd monitored my every move since Mark and I started dating, looking for weaknesses she could exploit. The most recent entry was dated 2 weeks ago. Claire is becoming more assertive, questioning decisions. This is how it started with Sarah. Need to begin phase 2 before she influences Mark completely. The prescription angle worked before. Dr. Morrison still writes what I need. I photographed everything. Every page, every document, every surveillance photo, every word in that journal. My phone's camera captured it all while my mind raced through implications, connections, and memories that suddenly made horrible sense. Sarah's divorce hadn't been Mark's decision. It had been orchestrated by Linda, piece by piece, until Mark believed his wife was betraying him. And now Linda was preparing to do the same to me. What was phase 2? What had she done to Sarah that worked? I replaced everything exactly as I'd found it, locked the drawer, and pocketed the key. Downstairs, I grabbed my laptop and started researching. Sarah's name plus Mark's hometown plus divorce. Articles appeared. Local news from 7 years ago. Sarah Martinez, found dead from an apparent prescription drug overdose 6 months after her divorce from Mark Calloway. Ruled accidental. She'd been struggling with depression following the separation. According to friends and family, she'd been seeing a psychiatrist, Dr. Robert Morrison, the same doctor Linda had mentioned in her journal. My entire body went cold. Linda hadn't just destroyed Sarah's marriage, she'd driven her to death. Whether intentional or not, Linda's campaign of psychological torture and manipulation had contributed to Sarah's overdose. And now she was planning something similar for me. I called Mark. He didn't answer. Typical when he was in the middle of a project. I left a voicemail asking him to come home as soon as possible, as it was urgent. Then I called someone else, a lawyer I'd met through work, a woman who specialized in harassment and domestic abuse cases. She answered on the third ring, listened to my rushed explanation, and told me to stay calm, don't confront Linda yet, and come to her office first thing tomorrow morning with all the evidence I'd gathered. I spent the next 2 hours backing up the photos to 3 separate cloud accounts, emailing copies to myself, the lawyer, and a trusted friend with instructions to only open if something happened to me. Linda returned at 9:30, breezing in with her book club smile, asking if I wanted tea. I said I was tired, going to bed early. She watched me climb the stairs, and I felt her eyes on my back like insects crawling across my skin. In bed, I pretended to sleep when Mark finally came home after midnight. He kissed my forehead, whispered an apology for being late, and fell asleep within minutes. I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, wondering how much he knew. Was he complicit, or was he another victim of Linda's manipulation? Genuinely believing the lies she'd fed him about Sarah, potentially beginning to believe whatever she was planting about me. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Mark had already left when I came downstairs. Linda was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. Neither of us would eat. She asked if I was feeling all right. I said, just a headache, probably stress. She offered me something for it, reaching into her purse for a bottle of pills. I declined. She insisted, said they were very effective. Dr. Morrison had prescribed them for her, but she barely needed them, and I looked like I could use one. Every instinct screamed danger. This was it. Phase 2, whatever Linda had done to Sarah, she was beginning with me. I took the pill from her, thanked her, and pretended to swallow it with orange juice. The moment she turned away, I slipped it into my pocket. The lawyer's office was in a downtown building with too much glass and chrome. Her name was Angela Morrisonneau, relation to the doctor. She assured me when I flinched at the name. She examined the photographs on my phone with increasing intensity. Her expression shifted from professional interest to genuine alarm as she scrolled through Linda's journal entries, the surveillance photos, the letters filled with false allegations. She looked up at me with grim certainty. This wasn't just harassment. This was stalking, potentially conspiracy to commit fraud with the forged letters, possibly even involvement in Sarah's death if Linda had manipulated her prescriptions. Angela made calls. Within 2 hours, I was sitting in a police station talking to a detective named Cardenas, who specialized in cases involving psychological manipulation and elder abuse, though Linda was the abuser, not the victim. He listened to everything, examined the evidence, and made his own calls. By late afternoon, we had a plan. They would investigate Sarah's death, exhume her body if necessary for new toxicology tests. They'd interview Dr. Morrison about his prescriptions for both Sarah and Linda. They'd search Linda's home, my home, with a warrant, and they needed me to wear a wire to get Linda to talk about her plans, to incriminate herself. I agreed to everything. That evening, I returned home before Linda. I wore the recording device hidden under my shirt, a tiny microphone disguised as a button. Detective Cardenas and 2 other officers waited outside in an unmarked van. Linda arrived at 6, surprised to see me home so early. I told her I'd left work because I couldn't stop thinking about something, about Sarah. Her face went carefully neutral. She asked why I was bringing up Mark's ex-wife. I told her I knew about the drawer, the files, the journal. I'd found the key, and I'd seen everything. The mask dropped. For the first time in 3 years, I saw Linda without pretense. Her eyes went hard and cold, calculating. She didn't deny it, didn't make excuses. Instead, she told me I'd made a mistake, that I should have minded my own business, that everything she'd done was to protect Mark, to keep him from being hurt by women who weren't good enough, who would eventually leave him or hurt him. I asked about Sarah, about her death. Linda's smile was chilling. She said Sarah had been weak, too fragile for the real world. That was when Sarah started taking the pills Linda had given her. Pills Linda had gotten from Dr. Morrison under pretenses Sarah's existing prescriptions interacted badly. It was unfortunate, but inevitable. Sarah would have self-destructed eventually anyway. She'd killed her, maybe not with her own hands, but deliberately, methodically, by providing drugs she knew would interact fatally with Sarah's antidepressants. I asked if she'd planned the same for me, if that was what the pill this morning had been. But Linda tilted her head, studying me like I was a specimen under glass. She said I was smarter than Sarah, more stubborn, that she'd underestimated how long it would take to isolate me from Mark, to make him doubt me the way he'd doubted Sarah. But she had time, and patience, and eventually, whether through pills or manufactured evidence, or simply breaking my spirit, she'd remove me from Mark's life too. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something almost gentle. She told me I could make this easier on myself. I could simply leave. divorce Mark quietly, take a settlement, and move across the country. She'd even help financially. All I had to do was disappear. Or I could fight. And she'd destroy me the way she'd destroyed Sarah. I told her there was a third option, that she could go to prison. Her expression shifted to confusion just as Detective Cardenas knocked on the door. Linda was arrested that night. The charges came in: waves, stalking, harassment, fraud for the forged letters, illegal distribution of prescription drugs, and after Sarah's body was exhumed and new tests were performed, involuntary manslaughter. Dr. Morrison lost his medical license. He'd been writing prescriptions for Linda for years, trusting her claims about anxiety and insomnia without proper examinations. Some of those pills had gone directly to Sarah, mixed with her legitimate prescriptions, creating a lethal combination Linda had researched thoroughly. Mark's world shattered. He'd been as much a victim as Sarah and I, manipulated by his mother's obsessive need to control his life. The divorce from Sarah, the doubts about her fidelity, the belief that she'd been mentally unstable, carefully constructed lies. Linda had fed him while isolating him from the truth. Our marriage survived, but it required work, therapy, honest conversations about the ways Linda had influenced his perceptions, the red flags he'd missed or excused. He carried guilt about Sarah's death, about not seeing his mother's about bringing me into a home where I'd been surveilled and plotted against. We moved out immediately, found an apartment across town, and began rebuilding our lives away from Linda's shadow. Sarah's family filed a civil suit against Linda's estate, and I testified at the criminal trial. My recorded conversation with Linda was played for the jury. She was sentenced to 12 years. The judge's words were harsh: premeditated psychological torture, resulting in one death and the attempted destruction of another woman's life. Linda showed no remorse, even in sentencing. She maintained she'd only been protecting her son. I visit Sarah's grave sometimes, bring flowers, tell her I'm sorry no one saw what was happening to her in time, that her death led to justice eventually, even if it came too late for her. The guest room drawer is gone now, along with the house I lived in for 3 years without ever truly feeling safe. But the lesson remains: when someone tells you not to look, not to question, not to investigate us, especially when it's framed as protection or concern, that's often the exact moment you need to look closer. Boundaries matter, privacy matters, but when secrecy is enforced with warnings and locks and carefully controlled narratives, when someone works that hard to keep you from seeing something, there's usually a reason, and that reason is rarely benign. I learned that mother-in-law problems aren't always just personality clashes or boundary issues. Sometimes they're symptoms of something darker, more controlling, more dangerous. I learned that documentation is power. Those photographs I took saved my life and gave Sarah's death the investigation it deserved. Most importantly, I learned to trust my instincts. For 3 years, I'd felt uncomfortable in that house, but dismissed it as adjustment issues or being too sensitive. Every red flag I'd rationalized away was valid. Every moment of unease was my subconscious recognizing danger. My conscious mind refused to see. To anyone watching this, anyone who feels watched, controlled, or systematically undermined by someone in their life, document everything. Trust your instincts, and never let someone convince you that your discomfort is unreasonable or that you're imagining patterns that aren't there. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who smile while they sharpen their knives. Sometimes the warning not to open the drawer isn't about protecting something precious, it's about hiding something monstrous. Have you ever discovered something that changed your entire understanding of someone? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments. And if this resonated with you, if you've ever felt gaslit or watched or manipulated, subscribe. These stories matter. They shine light on the hidden dangers we often dismiss until it's too late. The drawer is open now, and the truth, however horrible, is better than living in ignorance of the danger standing right beside you.